Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for an online briefing in support of the launch of the newly updated Advanced Reactor Technology Primer and Company Compendium from the Nuclear Innovation Alliance. Today, we'll be joined by NIA staff and special guests from the industry for a conversation about the latest developments in advanced reactor technology and the companies that are leading the charge to move the industry forward. My name is Ben Finzel, and I'm president of Renew PR in Washington, D.C. I have the pleasure and the privilege of supporting NIA on communications, and I'm also going to be serving as the moderator for today's briefing. I will hand things over to NIA Executive Director Judy Greenwald in a moment, but first, here's an overview of the agenda for today's conversation. Judy is going to introduce NIA and provide some context for these now annual resources. And she'll be followed by Zach Koshgarian of the NIA staff. And Zach's going to provide an overview of both documents and what's changed in this year's update. After Zach's summary presentation, I'm going to return and I'll introduce our special guest today, Lou Martinez of Westinghouse, Ben Reinke of X Energy, and Peter Hastings of Kairos. You're welcome to start asking questions now if you'd like by typing your question, your name, and your affiliation in the Q&A field. Just go right ahead and do that. And then once we begin the Q&A session in about 20, 30 minutes or so, I'll do my best to take the questions in the order in which they are received. But first, let's begin with comments from NIA's Executive Director, Judy Greenwald. Judy.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everyone. We appreciate you joining us for this briefing on the release of our annual updates to our Advanced Nuclear Technology Primer and Company Compendium. The advanced nuclear energy space is evolving so rapidly that it's hard to keep up, and today we're here to help you do just that. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about NIA. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan think and do tank working to create the conditions for success for advanced nuclear reactors as a key climate and energy security solution. We've played a leading role in informing major federal legislation to reform advanced reactor licensing at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and to expand and improve the Department of Energy's nuclear innovation efforts. We also collaborate with a broad group of stakeholders to coordinate advanced reactor advocacy in the United States. NIA analyst Zach Koshgarian updated these NIA resources that we're highlighting today, and you'll hear from him shortly. After Zach, we'll be joined by a panel of three leading advanced reactor developers, Kairos, X Energy, and Westinghouse, to discuss their innovative nuclear energy projects and highlight the relevance of the updated primer and company compendium. We first released our Advanced Nuclear Reactor Technology Primer in September 2021 and have updated it annually. It's a 101 document to demystify advanced nuclear reactors and explain the characteristics of the most common types and leading designs. The primer serves as a guide for media, policymakers, stakeholders, and anyone else who wants to understand the rapidly evolving nuclear energy space. We first released our company compendium in July 2022 as an introduction to the advanced reactor business ecosystem for potential investors and other key stakeholders. The compendium contains brief descriptions of many of the companies and others associated with the planning, design, testing, construction, supply chains, and operation of advanced nuclear energy projects. It also highlights leading advanced reactor developers and summarizes publicly available information on agreements between developers and the private sector, government, universities, and other organizations. The compendium is a helpful complement to the primer. The primer and the compendium will serve as resources you can use to understand the size, scope, and progress of advanced nuclear energy commercialization in the United States. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Ben.
Thank you, Judy. Now, NIA analyst Zach Koshgarian will provide an overview of the updates to the primer and the compendium. So Zach, what's new?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. So the primer and compendium are our premier resources that provide people with the knowledge and resources necessary to fully understand the different advanced reactor technologies, landscapes, and business ecosystems. We update these documents yearly to reflect the developments that occurred in the advanced nuclear space. These changes typically include updated deployment timelines, regulatory status, different agreements signed between reactor developers and industrial partners or utilities, and finally, we feature new advanced reactor companies on the scene. And Devin, you can head to the next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. So as we all know, nuclear energy is a rapidly evolving commercial field with companies starting to build supply chains and deploy their technologies. And there have been a lot of developments in the advanced reactor space this year. So I won't touch too much on it because we have Kairos and X Energy speaking later in the call. But some of the highlights this year include Kairos signing a deal with Google to deploy SMRs and X Energy signing a deal with Amazon to develop and deploy their advanced reactor technology. Other updates include the addition of Allo Atomics, a microreactor developer building a 10 megawatt reactor inspired by Idaho National Labs' Marvel reactor. Abilene Christian University received their construction permit to begin construction on their molten salt research reactor, making it the first U.S. university research reactor approved in more than 30 years. And you can head to the next slide, please, Devin. Regarding deployment timelines, Holtec updated their expected deployment of the SMR 300 at Palisades to 2030. Kairos expects their demonstration reactor to deploy in 2027, with Hermes 2 deploying sometime in the late 2020s. Oklo expects to deploy their demonstration reactor at INL in 2027. TerraPower submitted their construction permit application to NRC earlier this year and expects to operate their demonstration reactor in 2030. Westinghouse expects their eVinci reactor to be deployed in 2030, and ArcClean Technologies expects their Port La Pro project demonstration project to deploy in 2029, and their Port of Belledune project to deploy in the early to mid-2030s. BWXT expects their Banner project, which is a high-temperature gas reactor, to deploy in early 2030s, and BWXT's Project Pele, which is a transportable high-temperature gas microreactor, is expected to deploy in 2026. And lastly, on the expected deployment timeline, GE Hitachi's BWRX 300 is expected to deploy in Darlington, Canada in 2028. On the financial front, nuclear energy is now being supported by major businesses and financial institutions as a key source of energy for demand growth and energy security, in addition to meeting our climate goals. GE Hitachi, for example, was awarded a $43 million grant by the UK government to support the development of the BWRX 300 SMR. And again, you'll hear more about the Google and Amazon investments in the advanced nuclear later on in the webinar. Some highlights on the regulatory front. Holtec made news by completing the first part of the UK's generic design assessment process in record time, about 10 months. TerraPower and Kairos both received their construction permits from the NRC. Oklo expects to file its first combined license application next year. There is an ongoing review of NuScale standard design approval by the NRC. And lastly, NRC staff used an environmental assessment instead of an environmental impact statement for Hermes 2, which resulted in a more efficient licensing process. And again, all these updates and more you can find within our newly released primer and compendium. So we hope that these resources will be helpful to a broad group of stakeholders engaging in advanced nuclear energy innovation, commercialization, and investment. And now that we've covered our updated resources, I'm happy to pass it off to our amazing panel that we've gathered here today, who will be introduced by Ben. So Ben, I'll hand it back off to you.
Thank you, Zach. These are really great resources, and wow, that list, my goodness, there was a lot there. I'm sure we're going to come back to that slide a couple times, but these really should be helpful, hopefully, for lots of different audiences, as Judy said before, media, legislators, regulators, analysts, everybody. As a quick reminder, if you have a question for any of our presenters today, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A box right now, along with your name and your affiliation, and I will try to ask the questions in the order in which they're received. So if you want to be sure that we get to yours, ask it early if you can. Now I'm pleased to introduce our three very special guest speakers for today's briefing. As we've noted, there are significant challenges and opportunities in developing and deploying advanced nuclear reactors. We talk about that all the time. And our three guests have unique insights into these challenges and opportunities given their roles in helping to develop and deploy these technologies. So first, we're going to be joined by Lou Martinez, the Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President of R&D and Innovation for Westinghouse. Lou will be followed by Dr. Ben Reinke, Vice President for Global Business Development and Advisor to the CEO of X Energy. And Ben will be followed by Peter Hastings, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Quality at Kairos Power. I've asked each of our special guests to talk in turn once we begin. That way I won't interrupt the flow of their conversation by introducing them again. So I'll just come back at the end of the response panel and we'll get started on Q&A. But for now, Lou, we welcome your remarks.
Hi, Ben. Thank you, Judy, Ben, and Zach, and all the NIA team for hosting us today to share the updates. As Judy and Zach were mentioning, there are exciting times happening in our industry, We have continuing tailwinds from energy security to climate concerns that have created this favorable environment for nuclear across the globe, not only on the United States, that reflects really life extension of the existing fleet, but also a super renewed interest in building new nuclear plants, advanced reactors, but also large ones. Westinghouse, our vision is together to advance technology and services to power a clean, carbon-free future. I'm sure all of us will recognize on that mission. To support the 24/7, we provide services on the entire nuclear fleet with two major axes. One is to provide carbon-free advanced reactor technologies that we are going to discuss today, that obviously they enable flex load, carbon-free grid for future to our customers. On that front, obviously, we have a series of products that goes for large reactors like the AP1000 series. But on the SMR side, we have the AP300 and also the eVinci microreactor that we are going to be sharing today, some of the updates. Just for the record, we are also developing a long-term storage program that runs and complements very well all the different products that we have. The second part of the strategy in Westinghouse, just to mention it, I know it's not the topic today, but we believe that we need to keep our nuclear plants up and running, and Westinghouse has also a role to safely operate and support our customers to safely operate, perform LTOs and power upgrades. And there we are fully agnostic on the technologies. We're even supporting some of the SMR and advanced vendors with technology briefs, with fuels, to be sure that we are successful. We have seen that after years of stagnant demand on the OECD countries, suddenly we see, thanks to AI, to data centers, and accelerated growth. And a lot of the studies position that growth between 8% to 18% by 2030, which creates a great opportunity for all of us with the technologies that we are presenting. That need is not all the same. It's not the same what an low requirement for an hyperscaler that wants to provide cloud computing or data storage, that somebody that is working more on the edge application that needs real-time processing for AIoT. So you see the market is very segmented, and I think each of us today on the roundtable is answering to part of that segment. In Westinghouse, the set of products and technologies that we are deploying, obviously the AP1000, I know it's not the topic today, but as you know, we have learned a lot of lessons learned with this one. We know that a repeatable design, mature supply chain, modular construction actually helps, and those are lessons learned that we need also to adapt to new technologies on the SMR and the advanced reactor sector. Currently, there are 6 units or AP1000s worldwide that they are operating and 12 that they are under construction. So indeed, they are very intense and exciting times for us. On the SMR side, at Westinghouse, we are positioning ourselves in 2 segments. On the SMR, we have the AP300. It was announced in 2023. It was really a customer demand saying, well, now that you know how to build the AP1000s and have an operating fleet, can we downsize? Is there any specific needs for those kind of reactors? And actually, we built that ultra compact design with a very, very simplified design to reduce construction timeframes. But there is not, I always joke saying this, I'm the CTO, AP300 is not on my portfolio because obviously it's already a mature technology that is solving engineering and project issues like the AP1000 with the customers that we are engaging. But I'm sure we will have the opportunity to touch base a bit later on. And one of the topics that you have asked me to deep dive and make more updates, and Zach, you mentioned it, is the eVinci. eVinci is a microreactor that is competing actually with batteries. The idea is to secure and rely needs and applications for mining, industry, remote communities. It's a 5 megawatt electric that deliver that reliable carbon-free electricity, but also heat generation for those industrial mines or remote communities. An update on the licensing side, on the eVinci side, as you might know, we are developing the eVinci Nuclear Test Reactor, NTR. The idea is to test it in the National Reactor Innovation Center at the Dome in Idaho National Lab. And for that, we have reached a very important milestone, that is the preliminary safety design report that help us actually to move forward into that path. What I would like to mention is that we are also utilizing cutting edge technologies like AI. In Westinghouse, we have developed a generic nuclear AI. We call it Bertha. Bertha really is a call out for Bertha Lomors, that was the first female engineer working in Westinghouse. And actually, those technologies are helping us to reduce the time and cost to license the eVinci microreactor. How it works is really to use AI to intelligently aggregate licensing data and generating draft documentation. Obviously, there is always an engineer behind the decisions that they are done, but it really accelerates part of the documentation process that, as you know, is very heavy driven. And we need to target those technologies before beginning of or around the 2030s. We have completed already an electrical demonstration unit in March 2024, and we have tested over 12 heat pipes. That is the technology that is utilized by eVinci. I will not go on this because I'm sure then during the Q&A, we will have time to deep dive. I just wanted to give a big or a quick update in where we are working in Westinghouse, especially on advanced nuclear. We are working on the AP300, that is a light water reactor downsizing for the AP1000, and the eVinci microreactor, doing a lot of progress on the licensing, on the design, and also on the commercial front. And from here, I will pass it to Ben to get also updates in what are happening in other technologies.
Thanks a bunch, Lou. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you, NIA, for the great work that you all do on a regular basis to highlight what's going on in the industry, the excitement around new nuclear. And I think I'll echo what you all have said and what Lou said in her opening comments, that the tailwinds have never been stronger for new nuclear. I think that we're seeing that in quite a few different ways in the industry. We at X Energy, as many of you know in the audience, have a project that is our first project that rolls up under what's called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program at the U.S. Department of Energy. That project is really an opportunity for us to carry forward the technology design all the way through completion. For us to capitalize our first fuel facility and then ultimately to bring to market our first reactors. So I want to give you a quick update on how things are going on that front, as it's really the launch pad for us to go to market and to hopefully establish a position where we and our supply chain partners, all of the folks that will build these reactors, will be able to scale together as a group. So if you're not familiar with X Energy, we really have kind of two main types of products. One is fuel, and the second is reactors. So within our reactors area, we have a main product that's referred to as the XE100. That is a high temperature gas cooled reactor. It's grid scale, modular, and produces power at 80 megawatts electric or 200 megawatts thermal. We also have reactor designs in working with various government agencies that we've developed. One of those is a similar smaller reactor, what we refer to as a microreactor. In our case, that was originally developed under Project Pele, a U.S. Department of Defense effort. We continue that design under project Pele as a second source of Pele reactor design, and we also have work under the U.S. Department of Energy there. So that's a single-digit megawatt electric reactor, similarly a high-temperature gas reactor, but something that is smaller in nature and useful in different types of market cases than the XE100. And then we have a bunch of work in really cool, exciting areas like space nuclear thermal propulsion, or for the surface of the moon or Mars. But those reactor designs all really rely on a type of fuel that we also manufacture today at a pilot facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. That fuel is called TRISO. It stands for tristructural isotropic. I won't bore you to death with the details, but the U.S. Department of Energy has a great description of this fuel on their website, and we do at X Energy as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that. DOE considers this to be the most robust nuclear fuel on Earth. And it really is all about the high temperature tolerant ceramics that encapsulate the uranium. And that encapsulation replaces the need for very large, the types of what we call containment, big, robust pressure vessels that are required to maintain a safe state in an accident scenario for today's reactors. And so that fuel really forms the basis of the safety case of our reactors. A couple quick things on how things are going at X Energy. I mentioned earlier that our first project is rolling up under the ARDP. Our partner on that project is our first customer, Dow Chemical. And Dow likes HTGRs as an opportunity to deploy to decarbonize their manufacturing processes. In order to do that, we have to provide both process heat and electricity. And that process heat has to be up at temperatures and pressures that are high enough to replace what today is natural gas infrastructure. So at the Seadrift site in the state of Texas near Victoria, we're deploying a project that's referred to as Project Longmont. That will be 4 Xe-100 reactors, so 80 megawatts electric apiece or 200 megawatts thermal apiece. That means the equivalent of about 320 megawatts electric. And we'll replace 3 natural gas boilers that are deployed in a cogen fashion today with 4 Xe-100 units. That is the cornerstone of our ARDP program, which is a multi-billion-dollar award from the U.S. Department of Energy. And that program also funds, as I said earlier, the completion of our design work and the manufacturing, ultimately the scale up to commercial scale and manufacturing of the fuel that goes into that reactor. I mentioned earlier, we manufacture this type of fuel. This is an example of a triso pebble. So this is our fuel form. It's about the size of a billiard ball. And we're taking what we've been doing for about 7 years inside the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, using essentially the same equipment, but in a more ergonomic layout, and deploying that in our first fuel facility. So briefly on that, things are moving along very well on the project. We've characterized the site for Dow, which we had made an announcement of as the first site roughly a year and a half ago. We continue finishing our work under our construction permit application, ready for submission here very soon. That's come together quite well as well. And we've made improvements in the design as we've gone through that process. So overall, that project is moving along very well, and we're making progress on the deployment of our commercial fuel facility, which we refer to as TRISO X1 or TX1, and are now a little over 2 years through the licensing process for that facility. Outside of that, a lot of other exciting tailwinds, as I mentioned, in the marketplace, and we have been able to substantially increase the speed for our path to market through private fundraising, which has been led recently in a fundraising round of about $500 million by Amazon as the strategic partner investor with a series of other investors as well. So I look forward to talking a bit more about what's going on in that commercial space when we get to Q&A. Thanks a lot. And with that, I would love to introduce Peter Hastings. Peter is a friend and a great mind in the space of nuclear. If you don't know him, he's broken all kinds of great ground with the NRC and been a real leader and pioneer. So I'm looking forward to hearing Peter's update. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Ben. And thanks to the NIA team for the invitation to participate today. NIA's publication today is another in a series of important steps toward informing stakeholders who are essential to the success of our industry, and we're excited and honored to be able to contribute. Kairos Power has been very busy in the last year especially, but actually since our inception over 7 years ago, coming up on 8 years. Excuse me, Kairos emerged from a DOE-sponsored university research project where our founders, all 3 of whom participated in that project, concluded the next logical step in developing our molten salt-cooled, TRISO-fueled high-temperature reactor was to establish a company devoted solely to that technology, with a mission to enable the world's transition to clean energy, with the ultimate goal of dramatically improving people's quality of life while protecting the environment. As you'll see in NIA's primer, we sort of straddle the advanced reactor categories as a bit of a hybrid. We're molten salt cooled using FLiBe as our coolant, but unlike others who are referred to as molten salt reactors whose fuel is dissolved in the salt, Our technology uses solid TRISO fuel, which Ben just talked about in detail, and has been indicated others use TRISO in high temperature gas reactors. To my knowledge, we're the only ones using TRISO with a molten salt coolant. So that hybrid design enables us to capture the value of that virtually indestructible fuel form, as well as the advantages of molten salt, which has a tremendous heat capacity. It has the ability to maintain single phase at all of our operating temperatures, and has a very strong affinity for stray radionuclides, which increases our safety margins even further beyond the operating fleet, which, it has to be said, is already the safest form of baseload electricity production ever created by the species. In addition to our hybrid design, we're unique in several other ways. We use a rapid iterative development approach, not only when it comes to hardware development, in ways that enable us to establish technology and cost certainty, and dramatically reducing programmatic risk, but also in licensing and in commercial aspects of development and deployment. On the technology side, we've piloted much of our technology through an integrated test platform known as the Engineering Test Unit, or ETU, which itself has 3 iterations. We're also fielding a series of demonstration reactors, actual nuclear demonstrations, the Hermes and Hermes 2 test reactors, in a way that dramatically reduces uncertainty for our commercial reactors by designing, licensing, building, and operating our own reactors, which in turn will yield very high confidence in the time and resources to deploy the commercial fleet. Construction of the Hermes reactor, as well as the 3rd iteration of the Engineering Test Unit, is currently underway in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We preceded our Hermes and Hermes 2 licensing efforts back to the iterative development approach with a substantial series of methodological and phenomenological topical reports, which really set the stage for efficient licensing reviews when it came time for the NRC staff to review the Hermes and the Hermes 2 construction permits. We're also making significant investments in hardware development and manufacturing. We have a substantial fuel prototyping operation, we're producing molten salt, and we're manufacturing reactor components in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're industry leading when it comes to licensing, with a Hermes construction permit being a first in several categories, and at the risk of short-circuiting a very likely question in the Q&A session, with NRC approval of the Hermes 2 construction permit literally 90 minutes ago. A review that was concluded in only a year, so we're very happy about that. We've also piloted milestone-based contracting with our advanced reactor demonstration contract, excuse me, a move that dramatically increases contracting efficiency and reduces administrative burden and cost and risk. NIA was a real partner in sort of the thought movement on moving that concept forward, so we really appreciate that as well. And of course, we just announced a pace-setting commercial agreement with Google to deploy a fleet of advanced reactors. So that's Kairos Power in a nutshell. We're very proud to be building a strong track record in an effort to achieve our mission to enable the world's transition to clean energy. We're also grateful to NIA and all their efforts to contribute to forward movement in the industry. And with that, Ben, back to you, the other Ben.
Thank you so much. Wow. And nothing like breaking a little news there, Peter. Gee, we appreciate that. I mean, so we heard about NRC approval. We saw a TRISO pebble. We learned about Bertha. I feel like we've already done so much today. It's quite something. We are ready to move to our Q&A, but thank you, Lou and Ben and Peter, for sharing that insight and that information. Wow, that was really helpful. And thanks to Judy and Zach for coming back on camera. If you have a question, as a reminder, please put it in the Q&A box. You're also welcome to use the raise hand feature if you would like to ask it yourself directly. That is no problem. Nice way to break up lots of me talking. So please do that if you'd like to. We do have one question, one lonely little question in the Q&A box, which I'll get to. Fortunately, I have some in my email, so I will go to those. But if you do have questions for any of our folks, want to encourage you to ask them in the Q&A box or use the raised hand feature. So first question is from Paul Day at Reuters Events. Do you think the United States can be a world leader in advanced reactors, considering the earliest deployment isn't expected until 2028 and competition from China? Is the new administration expected to support U.S. advanced nuclear companies' global expansion? Good question. Who wants to go first? I imagine several of you have some thoughts there.
I'll jump in. First of all, Peter, congratulations. That's fantastic news. I think great to hear, and it's good for you clearly, and it's good for all of us that you've demonstrated a pathway with the NRC that's really moved the needle, I think, on decreasing overall time and risk. So thank you. This is a great question. I would encourage everybody that is interested in this topic on competition with China, and frankly, competition with Russia, to take a look, go back a few years to 2020, when I guess we were in the final days of the last Trump administration, and there was a large energy package, bipartisan in nature, that was signed into law called the Energy Act of 2020. Inside of that was a package, a large set of policies that we're all operating under today. And that included the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, the HALEU Availability Program, a number of other pieces. And that bill was called the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act. And if you go and you look at some of the press statements around NELA at the time, a lot of the rhetoric, one of the key features of that bill was it was inherently intended to get the U.S. back in the game vis-a-vis Russia and China on advanced reactors, to lean into the great innovation and work that was going on today and in the private sector, and enable that through public-private partnership. I think what you're hearing today is that we're making significant progress under that law, and that the industry in general continues to innovate and move forward. It is very true that the Russians and the Chinese have deployed advanced reactors already, that they have established a lead in the marketplace. But I believe that the technology advancement that's going on in the United States will in fact bring better technologies to market in a way that's much more nimble. And the tailwinds that we're seeing, both from the public policy that groups like NIA have led on in helping to shape, and ultimately the opportunities from just the market need for additional power and additional clean heat, baseload electricity, firm clean power in the United States is really going to drive, I think, a renaissance this time that's successful in the nuclear industry, and that will lead to the U.S. taking a more dominant position in the long run back in the global marketplace.
Thank you, Ben. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I'll just add on very briefly. I agree with everything that Ben said, and just to reemphasize, if you asked me several years ago, what's the one thing that Republicans and Democrats are going to agree on, not only in policy space but in actual execution and interest space, I would not have said nuclear power. But that's where we are. We've seen unprecedented bipartisan support, bicameral support. And so we saw great support at the end of the last Trump administration. We saw ongoing support throughout the Biden administration, and we're very optimistic that the second Trump administration is going to continue that train rolling.
Thank you, Judy. Oh, go ahead, Lou.
Sorry, Ben. Ben and Peter, they have already expressed very aligned, obviously, with what they are saying and described correctly. But we have seen in the last years and in the upcoming 4 major trends that position actually the U.S. technology globally very well. First, obviously, the decarbonization goals that we have all of us discussed in our developments. Second is the fact that nuclear provides that energy price stability that is required for growth. The energy security that the current geopolitical situation gives to nuclear, that is shifting to Eastern European and the US, the development of those advanced technologies. And the last one is the public acceptance. And thank you to the work of organizations as NIA, we are here today getting the layer support of those technologies in different areas. And those 4 trends, I think, pushes OECD countries and US leading in the coming years in the front of nuclear, with the bipartisan support that Peter and Ben has presented.
Thank you. And Judy, it looked like you wanted to add something before we move on.
Yeah, I'll just, I agree with all the points that the other panelists have made. I would just also add that our secret sauce, I think, here in the United States is different from in other countries. The leadership that China and Russia have shown thus far is with state-owned enterprises, but we have both private sector innovation and commercialization savvy combined with big public support, and they're mutually reinforcing. And it's because of that that we've been making a lot of strides, and that's why I'm so optimistic for our success, both domestically and in the global marketplace.
Thank you, Judy. And folks, listened, we have questions coming into the Q&A box, which is great. So a question from Atomica Consulting, and it's for Ben, the other Ben, the doctor. Please discuss HALEU supply chain and availability for your deployment at scale.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are two ways that we look at this. The first is we need to demonstrate our first reactors with Dow under ARDP. And we have identified material with the Department of Energy. We've been working very closely with them for the last several years to make sure that they have material that could be made available to us to sufficiently de-risk the early phases of deployment for our Dow project. And we're very comfortable with where things are landing there. They've been a great partner to us and to Dow. And that's important for getting the technology demonstrated. But the bigger question at scale is when available material will be there in the marketplace. We have had, I think, great congressional support for this topic in the form of multiple billions of dollars to try to get the ball moving on a HALEU deployment. Two important things to note on that. One is that HALEU availability is really a challenge overall in what we call LEU SWU, so that the amount of enrichment that's available in the marketplace, because about 80% of the enrichment work that goes in, the amount of times you have to spin the centrifuges, 80% of that for making HALEU is actually LEU production. And with the work that's gone on at the Department of Energy and in Congress to help stand up this HALEU availability program and to take action on trying to distance ourselves from Russian supplies, I think that we're on a good track. Now, it's time for the industry to deliver. We were excited to see that the department was able to make the initial awards under the program for enrichment and for deconversion. But now it's time for the various winners of those awards to get under contract and move as fast as possible. So we're confident that there will be HALEU available in the marketplace, and that frankly, it's a very scalable technology that can move modularly up in production alongside our deployments of our reactors.
Thank you. And Judy, I don't know if you want to add anything about all of NIA's work on HALEU, including some great resources on the website.
Yeah, so if anything you ever wanted to know about HALEU, you can find it on our website if you're interested. And the high assay low enriched uranium, or HALEU, is very important to many of the advanced reactors that we're now developing. It's very important that we have a domestic supply, because we don't want to be dependent on other countries, or at least we don't want to be dependent on unfriendly countries for that supply. So the U.S. needs to play a big role in jumpstarting a commercial HALEU development capacity to get the fuels developed and supplied. And so it's very important. We're on it, and it's a very important area and important for the development of the technology and the future of nuclear energy.
Judy, I would like to point that the three panelists that you have invited, we are actually basing part of our technology on the TRISO fuel and the high HLU. So we have X-Energy, Kairos Power, and also the Vinci microreactor is also intending to utilize TRISO fuel. So I think it gives the traction on the development side and also the traction on the market that is going to help actually to solve the high HLU and the TRISO production for scalability on the commercial side. So again, thank you for all the hard work you are putting, helping us to be on that point.
And if you want to check that out while we're talking, it's nuclearinnovationalliance.org. You can go to the resources page and search for HALEU. You can also go to nuclearinnovationalliance.org and see the primer and download it, and see the company compendium and download it. So wanted to make sure I mentioned that. We have more questions now, unless anyone else wants to chime in on HALEU before I move on. Looking around the room. Nope. Okay. Next question is from Joe Tadino, and Joe is an independent Chicago journalist. I have a question about emerging SMR developments in Illinois. A 30-year moratorium on new nuclear energy was lifted last year with an effective date in 2026. after the state's emergency management and environmental protection agencies complete reviews and guidelines. Are the panelists seeing any developments on the construction side of the equation, with nuclear power companies filing to secure permits, facilities, or offtake contracts from utilities or industrial users? Illinois, who wants to do that one?
So I can start, and I'm sure others will weigh in as well. The short answer is yes. We're seeing lots of activity, and maybe in some ways a little bit under the radar. So it's good to highlight this. So we know that Hermes, Kairos Power's first demonstration reactor, is under construction in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Hermes 2, as I mentioned earlier, the construction permit for Hermes 2 was just approved today. We expect the permit to be issued any day now. Abilene Christian University is under active permitted construction with their university reactor. The Natrium reactor under TerraPower and GEH doesn't have a construction permit yet, but they are doing active site preparation and excavation activities there. They broke ground on that quite a while ago. Ben's X-Energy fuel plant broke ground several months ago. There's a lot of work going on, and it's important to highlight that. It's also important to highlight a lot of the recent activity in terms of off-takers, with Google expressing strong interest, Amazon expressing strong interest, and others in the sort of data center sector, as well as X-Energy's partner Dow. Duke Energy, as an example, the utilities under active site investigation for an early site permit at their Belews Creek station. So there's a lot of activity out there, and we think a lot more to come. And let me say that I appreciate the move on the part of Illinois to put some sort of rationality back into their energy policy and recognize that nuclear is the safest solution out there. It's the only baseload carbon-free source out there, and so we see it as a real sign of progress that they're willing to lift that moratorium.
Thanks, Peter. Anyone else?
I would like just to add that I agree with Peter that I think it has been a great progress on the policy side on Illinois. We cannot forget that we are talking about a state that has an incredible big tradition in nuclear, with over 11 nuclear power reactors, if I'm not wrong in my last statistics. So I think the future is very bright. Those conversations, even the activity that Peter mentioned that is going on in East Tennessee, is helping other states as well to see what is the path. And I think there are a lot of conversations right now going with the utilities at the governmental level to implement those commercial reactors. So when the policy supports, that means that those reactors will arrive to, to realization. So I think it's all very positive.
I'll just say
Thank you, Lou.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just say broadly that it's not just Illinois. All around the country, we're seeing state policymakers either taking another look at nuclear or continuing to invest in nuclear, or even taking their first look at nuclear. There's a number of states that have not had a big role in the nuclear energy space and are now seeing all of its merits and are very interested. And some are more interested in the reliability, some are more interested in the huge demand forecast that we're seeing now, some are very interested in meeting their climate goals. There's just so many reasons that state policymakers are really interested in nuclear energy, and the commercial nuclear energy industry is really responding.
Thank you, Judy. So several more questions, and I was about to say be careful what you wish for, because I'm not sure we're going to get to all of them, but we will do our best. If we miss any, we will follow up with you by email after the fact. Our next question is from our old friend Yulia Georgiou, now at Carbon Pulse. Hi, Yulia. And Yulia's question is, what is the advanced nuclear wish list for NRC licensing pathways? We've heard about a technology getting an environmental assessment versus an EIS, but what do we need to see from a regulatory side to move forward? Wow, how much time do you have? Who wants to start with that one?
I can start. So the short answer is more of the same. In other words, the NRC staff has done a lot of really good work in the last couple of years to demonstrate innovation and new approaches. That's the good news. The challenge, the ongoing challenge, is that we need to collectively do more, because with the volume of applications that the NRC anticipates coming in, even with the innovations and improvements that we've seen so far, they can't simply hire their way out of the bow wave that's going to be coming. So we're working very closely. We, the industry, and the NRC are working very closely to identify additional efficiencies. One effort in that regard was the sort of ill-fated Part 53, a new advanced reactor regulatory framework that was mandated by Congress. And the first stab at that, to be perfectly honest, was a bit of a miss on the part of the NRC staff. And we provided a ton of comments on the early draft, and the commission sent it back to the staff. It's now been resurrected in an updated form, and we're in the process of digesting what that looks like. But that's a platform, an opportunity, if you will, for us to identify additional opportunities. There's also a substantive effort going on in the NRC in response to a request to look at how to do, for lack of a better term, sort of product-based licensing, focus primarily on microreactors in the interest of rapid deployment, get as much of the review done in advance as possible, to take the technology component out of the siting decisions and develop siting envelopes so that the site component can be done much more quickly. The vast majority of what they're considering for those will apply to reactors beyond simply microreactors as well. So lots of work to do, lots of work going on, and there are opportunities to look for efficiencies, like the use of an environmental assessment in lieu of an EIS, which we were the beneficiary of, but we fully expect that precedent to be used for other proceedings in the future. Lots of other opportunities like that we could talk about for hours.
I'll just add one thing to this. I think Peter framed up very well a number of key initiatives. In our minds, the very first recommendation is do no harm at the NRC. And I think you've seen willingness to get innovative in the licensing work that has gone on for Kairos through the NRC. And what we're expecting is a very tight and efficient review process for our Part 50 application for the Dow project. We've done a lot of work in pre-licensing to set up that engagement. So we do believe that it will, in fact, follow a tack that's similar to what Peter has experienced with the NRC. And we don't want any major overhauls to screw up the process on these initial applications that are going to roll up under previous processes. That said, there is a great opportunity. Congress will, of course, continue to flex its muscles in oversight of the regulatory body. I think that continuing to demonstrate interest and help wherever the NRC identifies challenges and roadblocks in its own way, but to have Congress be able to help in moving some of those roadblocks out of the way will be very important. Just a great example within the ADVANCE Act, as Congress is overseeing it, and as the NRC is attempting to implement, there is a fee reduction contemplated within that scope, and there's been some early conceptual modeling of how that will look. The NRC has to go ahead and lay out their expectations for fees every year as part of their annual budgeting cycle. And so our hope is, that's a great example where ultimately there'll be regulatory relief on the fee side for all of the advanced reactor applicants that are coming in. So plenty of good opportunities to continue to move things. I would say do no harm, keep the ball rolling on the momentum that's already being generated, and make sure that we're as efficient as possible, and look for those opportunities to substantially decrease the regulatory burden for, especially as Peter described, those reactors that are otherwise going to have been qualified, reviewed in some way, and look for our ability to scale, not just in terms of the number of applicants that will be coming through the door and decreasing the review period for those, but reducing the man hours required to do that. If we can remove some red tape through this process, it means that there will be fewer humans required to do that work, and that the resources that they're going to try to hire will be able to do more work across more projects. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we're excited to engage.
Thank you.
I'll just say that we see the need for NRC reform on 3 timescales. The first is the sort of early movers who are interacting with the NRC, setting new precedents and working together. You need both good applicants and a good NRC to have these early successes, and then they'll set the stage for further success in the future. And the companies that you're seeing here on our program today are among the leaders working with NRC to make sure that we're actually making progress. These first few may take a little longer as we all learn, and then we have to move on to the next phase, which is Part 53 is one of the pieces of it, a rulemaking that's more specifically geared towards advanced reactors that we can do better in terms of efficiently reviewing. And then ultimately, we need something that we call high volume licensing, where we get so good at this that we get standardized both on the industry side and the NRC side. For all of these timescales, the ADVANCE Act has been actually the bulk of our wish list, and it just really has to be implemented well. And that's NRC's job with, of course, congressional oversight and, of course, the proactive and constructive role of companies who are actually engaging with the NRC. We really need at least three types of innovation to have success for advanced reactors. We need the technology innovation, we need the business model innovation, and we also need regulatory innovation. And we have to move on all 3 fronts. And there's progress being made, a lot of progress being made, but we need to do more.
Thank you, Judy. And I'll just point out that there is more on NIA's work in that regard on the website, nuclearinnovationalliance.org. But Lou wants the last word on this one, so we're going to give it to her.
Just to complement what it has been said, obviously, Peter is the pioneering with Kairos Power on this path, and is helping the others, as back in the days, NuScale did it as well, starting actually the machine of licensing and the machine of innovation on the regulatory framework. Something I would like just to point that I think is also positive. We are starting to see or engage also with the NRC with the utilization of new technologies as AI and Gen AI on the licensing process, that I think is going to be really creating, and it's going to be a game changer on the efficiency. Peter pointed how we can be more efficient. There are things that the law and the regulation can do, and then it's how actually you implement those improvements. And we are starting to see now that we can have access to ADAMS, that is, as everybody knows, the repository data of the NRC. You can actually train a generative AI. So the engineers going through the licensing process, they have access to data. And if everybody has been working on nuclear long time enough, knows how painful it is sometimes just to find the information in what you need to be compliant. Those kind of tools are starting to be implemented all across our organization. There are different vendors working on those kind of supports, of course, including Westinghouse, but it's also being used in how to accelerate part of the reports, how to create part of the documentation, and it's getting a lot of positive feedback from the NRC as a tool to be more efficient, knowing that they are going to start in a path where we'll have a lot of vendors that they will go through the licensing process, following the pioneers as Kairos.
Thank you very much, Lou. We're going to stick with the Part 53 theme because we have another question on Part 53. It's from Alexis Weiss, our new friend at Bloomberg, an energy reporter at Bloomberg. And Alexis says, hi, everyone. I'd love to get your thoughts on how proposed rulemaking Part 53 and the nuclear reactor GEIS proposal, I should say, will play a role in the industry's ability to develop and deploy small modular reactors and other advanced reactor models. So another very current question there. I don't know who wants to go first, but I have a guess.
I'll take a quick answer to this, because I think we already addressed a lot of it in the previous discussion. I think both are intended to allow scale and speed, and if they are ultimately implemented well and correctly, that they will allow that. It's really about the review, being able to ensure that an advanced reactor that has a much higher safety case is considered from a risk-assessed based approach, and that ultimately that risk-informed approach would lead to the ability to scale up deployments without as much review period. I think the GEIS also offers an opportunity to establish criteria that are appropriately sized to advanced reactors. And the devil will be in the details as these rules come to finalization, but I think they're really great steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll add on. I agree. In the case of the GEIS, it's really an important recognition that we understand very well what the environmental impact is of nuclear plant deployment generally, and the site-specific stuff is relatively straightforward. So it's an important recognition that there are huge efficiencies in the environmental review that we can recognize up front. On Part 53, it does represent an opportunity for some additional improvement on advanced reactor processes. It is important, though, to acknowledge that when Part 53 first came along, there was a concern that the existing framework for the operating fleet under Part 50 and Part 52 was somehow not going to be adequate for advanced reactors, and that it would require a lot of sort of calisthenics and exemptions and so forth to license an advanced reactor under the existing framework. And we now have existence proof that that's not the case. It's actually not as hard to license an advanced reactor under Part 50 or Part 52 as we were afraid it might be. So the fact that Part 53 continues to sort of slog along does not in any way impede forward progress for first movers. It'll be great to make it that much more efficient for advanced reactors in the future, but we don't need that new framework in order to license advanced reactors today.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else?
I'll just say that broadly, our goal with NRC reform is to do the job of assuring high safety standards and high environmental standards, and just do it more efficiently, and we can. And if we make efficiency a high priority, we can maintain and actually improve safety and environmental protection with a new generation of advanced nuclear energy. We just have to do it right, and we have to do it efficiently, because we are in a hurry as a country to make sure that we get clean, firm electricity on the grid to meet our energy needs. And we have to do it right, and we have to do it effectively and efficiently.
Thank you. So we have time, I think, for one more question. We have several questions about cost. We also have a question from Atomica Consulting about how you're thinking about financing structures and private capital availability. So I'm going to leave this for anyone who wants to either address financing structures and private capital or cost more generally.
Yeah, Ben, I'll jump in on this one. I mentioned earlier that we had recently announced a partnership with Amazon. And Peter talked about his partnership that at Kairos that they've developed with Google. What I think we're seeing is, in general, that there will be new financing structures that are brought to market for new nuclear. We're not yet to the point, of course, that we can deploy a PPA that encompasses the full expected exact price or cost of a nuclear power plant. We're not where renewables projects are today, or natural gas plants for IPPs, but one day we will get there. The announced partnership that we have was really three pieces, and this is pretty unique and innovative, and I think it's worth highlighting so that people can see a pathway that may exist. The first is that Amazon, along with a number of other key partners, came into our investment round in our company. So taking equity positions in X Energy to the tune of over $500 million in what we called our C1 round. In addition to that, Amazon made a statement that they intend to bring to market 5 gigawatts electric of X Energy projects for their own purposes by 2039. And then they wanted to show the pathway for doing that. And the first example of that was to take a major capital investment position in our second project with Energy Northwest out in the state of Washington. So they're investing directly to the tune of a substantial capital investment to help Energy Northwest move that project more rapidly. I think what we have seen is, because of the shadow of Vogtle, that there is a reticence among utilities, whether independent utilities, investor-owned utilities, public utilities, et cetera, to be able to fully capitalize these projects and get them moving. So what we've done, and many of our peers have done, is start to work with end users directly. Our first project is with Dow Chemical in Texas. That's working directly with an end user who will own and deploy those reactors for their own purposes. And our second project is now capitalized by a hyperscale AI partner. And that is, I think, a funding mechanism that will be replicated, that we'll see more in the marketplace. It's certainly the way that Amazon and X-energy intend to deploy projects to get the ball going, and really once the flywheel is up and spinning, then we think that the risk will have been mitigated enough that more traditional approaches will start to play.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ben, just very quick, I mean, the other Ben presented very well what is happening. And during this talk, Judy said very well, we need to have innovation on the technology side, on the development side, on the licensing side and regulatory framework, but also on the financial side. What I would like to point is, like, when you see a company as Westinghouse that has been for years, decades, hundreds of years actually, operating not on the nuclear, but that is the history of Westinghouse. Currently, we are owned by Brookfield and Cameco. Brookfield is one of the largest assets in the renewable sector in Canada. They gave us an incredible asset into how that new market on those financial mechanisms actually they are working on. And of course, Cameco is giving us all those insights on the fuel and the mining side. So that is something that probably for those of us that has been in this industry like for many decades, it will be almost impossible to dream about it like 20 or 10 years ago. And we are starting to see those private-public partnerships that Judy was mentioning, but also we're starting to see this new capital that usually they were not interested in nuclear developments, and that is creating that innovation as well on the financial side.
Thank you, Lou, and you get the last word. We have now spent more than an hour actually discussing advanced reactor technology and companies with all of you, and it's a shame we didn't get to all of our questions. My goodness, I asked for questions and we got them. We will follow up with those of you whose questions we didn't quite get to. But big thanks to Zach Koshgarian for all of his work on these important NIA resources. Much appreciation to Lou Martinez of Westinghouse, Ben Reinke of X-energy, and Peter Hastings of Kairos for joining us today. As a reminder, you can download these resources at nuclearinnovationalliance.org. They are free. We hope you'll use them as resources. And on behalf of Judy Greenwald and the entire NIA team, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you here for the next NIA briefing next month on spent fuel. So we are just going from big topic to big topic. So next month, NIA briefing on spent fuel. Watch your email inbox for information and also for updates on our publication schedule and next steps. But for now, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
All.